Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Beyond Train podcast. We're flying through these episodes. Episode 19 today, we have Dr. Jalal Khan. I'm really looking forward to this podcast, guys. He is certainly a fountain of knowledge, I think, and has a beautiful perspective on the body, on biology. We're probably going to get a little into quantum biology today. Remember, we talked about that with Kiara Lee. So I'm super interested in this. And yeah, we're probably going to talk a little bit about dentistry as well, since he's a dentist. And I'm sure we're not going to touch on fluoride too much, but you never know. Um, yeah, so Dr. Khan, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Leo.
Certainly. Yeah. So I ask all my guests an introductory question. I ask them to define health. What health means to them. How does it manifest? What does it look like?
Health for me is a flow state. It's a flow state of us harvesting energy and information from our environment, storing it inside of us, and using it on demand. And that whole travel of energy and information. And I think the key thing there is not just energy, but information as well. That entire process is just in absolute flow. There's no blockages. There's no congestion. It's just it's in flow. It's periodic. It's cyclical. It's just feels like you're traveling at 300 kilometers an hour, but you're still. That's flow. That's health for me.
Very nice. Flow, yeah. In energy and information, you kind of use these interchangeably. Could we throw light into that mix?
Yeah. So I mean, light provides information to matter and tells space time and matter how to bend. So really, the information is buried in light is the spin of the photons, and light itself may be energy, but the spin of the photons is the information that is imparted onto the matter that light interacts with. So yeah, the key part of health is not just the optimization of energy, but an integration of the right information into the matter that we're dealing with, such that the matter can behave the way that it needs to. And that's what the whole story of quantum biology is like, or is about.
Yeah, yeah, and probably all of nature as well, right?
100%.
But that's what it is. Yeah, yeah, very nice. Yeah, well, I mean, quantum biology. This is a super cool topic. I really enjoy it, and I love the connection. I love the connection of taking biology and bringing it down to the basics. And I was reading through your bio, and you were going on about how biology is just applied chemistry, and chemistry is just applied physics. So when you really get down to it, biology is quantum. If we're going to look at it from in a deeper perspective, right? You can't just stop at the chemicals and think that we're some you know inert biochemical makeup. I think that's quite foolish, but yeah, I mean, why go down to the quantum level? Why do we have to go that far to study life?
Well, we wouldn't have to if we were still living the way that we were designed to live. But what we've done in modern society is fundamentally create in a light environment. And by light environment, I don't just mean the light that we can see, but the light that we can't see. So like your Wi-Fi, your telecommunications, like your 4G and your 5G. We've created a light environment which is different to the light environment from which we evolved from, because we evolved millions of years ago, or thousands of years ago, with our bare feet on the ground, with as much of our skin exposed as practically possible. We weren't wearing sunscreen, we weren't wearing sunglasses, and we were eating food that was seasonal and local. And pretty much that's the key to health. I get asked all the time, what do I eat? I have friends and family, or even overseas people online. They'll ask me that, and the answer really is it's seasonal and local. So it doesn't really matter much else. So if we go and say to somebody that you need to get more sun, safe and responsible sun exposure, and you need to expose more of your skin to the sun, and you need to block artificial blue light at night and even during the day as well. Um, then and that's going to help a lot of your health issues like your sleep issues, etc., etc. They're going to be like, it can't be that easy. And so that's where the quantum biology comes in to actually explain the deep science, the complicated science, to show that it really is the simple things that are actually going to move the needle the most for people. And so yeah, why do we have to go to those to that scale? It's because we have a need to, in order to explain to everybody how things actually work. It is it is it is fundamental, but it's kind of not fundamental as well. So it is fundamental science, this whole quantum health and understanding how electrons and protons behave. But then there is the whole metaphysical aspect of things as well, which I do think trumps what the quantum biology space is talking about. So we, even in quantum health, tend to get stuck into like the thoughts about electrons and protons and light governing how they interact, and that being really the holy grail of health. But there is that whole aspect of the soul and spirit, and that mind, body, soul, spirit connection. And when you've got blockages in there, once again, that word blockages or congestion, that can express itself in a physical body way as well. So yeah, my approach to health is quantum, but it's also appreciating that there's this whole metaphysical aspect to our reality and the physical body that we inhabit. And a lot of the people that I work with have issues in the metaphysical space as opposed to in the physical space. Um, and I would say more than half would. And it just it requires a lot more of an open mind, and in order to help heal them. That being said, quantum health is really cool because it really helps to improve the health of the non-visual photoreceptors inside of our body. And when you improve the non-visual photoreceptors inside of oneself, that's when your ability to connect to source, the ability to heal your soul, the ability to make the changes necessary in your lifestyle to help heal yourself, they all become easier.
Yeah, amazing answer. Perfect answer. I couldn't answer it better. I couldn't even think of a better answer than that. Like we do as humans have this need to explain everything and try and get to the nitty gritty of it. And I'm guilty of it as much as the next guy. I'm on here in this podcast trying to explain everything. But we often get back to this. Health is simple, and if you do get back to the laws of nature, it really is simple. But I can I sympathize with this because coming from like the modern way of thinking with modern science, how everything requires an explanation for something to make sense in someone's mind nowadays, right? To say, oh, well, the sun is good for you and your light health and circadian rhythm matter. You got to get down to the quantum level to explain this because you're not seeing it from the chemical level. You're not seeing it from there. But even when you're talking about the metaphysical, quantum mechanics has like very interesting explanations for this as well. And I kind of think of the double slit experiment. And
Yeah,
it's really been a while since I've delved into that and studied that. So I might butcher it a little bit and correct me if I'm wrong. But the double slit experiment essentially showed that like a particle can a particle and a wave are interchangeable. They can act as one or the other depending on whether there's a conscious observer or not. And the wave kind of being in my thinking, looking back on this, the wave is what's beyond. It's the fabric beyond the physical, and maybe it is the metaphysical. Maybe it's an explanation for the metaphysical. I don't think the metaphysical necessarily needs an explanation, but you know, it's interesting that these concepts are present in in the study of on the quantum level, which is why I appreciate quantum biology so much in the scientific space because I think it encapsulates science truthfully and very well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a gift to mankind that quantum the quantum physics and all the associated sciences have really come to the fore over the course of the last 100 years, because it's given us, for those of us that need the answers and have yet to surrender, it has given us some tools to at least start to make sense of it all. And yeah, I think that whole wave particle duality, which was demonstrated in the double slit experiment, was like a paradigm shift in in our society, in our community. Like, I think it is absolutely essential that every child is taught that at school when they're in year 6 or year 7, to think that there is an unlimited amount of possibilities embedded in a wave function, which collapse into one with the conscious observer, means that the observer is really is in some way determining what is in their physical reality. But if they change the way that they think or feel or believe, that can change the possibility. It can open up their access to the other possibilities and observe a different one. That's kind of how I see it when I translate it just from the physics, but more into the health side of things. And the only way to do that is through changing the health of your non-visual photoreceptors, because we live in a light spectrum, the entire electromagnetic spectrum. We can only see 0.0035% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Um, but our body has sensors, and a very small amount of that is the visible light, and then there's the UV light and the infrared light. And the reason why most of the magic happens in our bodies outside the visible spectrum, in the UV light and the infrared light spectrum, is because we can't see those. We can't consciously observe those. And so, coming back to the double slit experiment, wave particle duality, when you can't see the light of the UV and infrared, then all the possibilities are endless. If we could see infrared light and UV light, then that would collapse into a space time thing, like, a phone charger or something like that. Um, that's a strange example, but that's the first thing that came to my mind because it was on the desk here. But just if you think about that, how much does that make one appreciate that it is the UV light and the infrared light where all the magic happens inside of us?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's even interesting to think about it too, right? Like we can only observe that 0.00035% through the eyes, right? But the the
And
the beautiful aspect of it is that our bodies utilize it all, right? Like and I just think of like if you look at what we say bees can see a different spectrum than us, and then they give a little picture of their perspective, and it's a whole different spectrum of light, right? They're running off these different sensors and um or different frequencies, right? A different spectrum than we are. But our cells and our body itself, outside of like the visual experiences all of this light all the time, which I think where the confusion comes from too, right? As we've reduced reality to what we can observe through the five senses, right? I think this is a little bit
correct.
limiting, right? um but yeah, I think you were gonna say something there.
Yeah, so I mean, like, the key non-visual photoreceptor for me is, I mean, there's so many, and I reckon, we could really sit here and debate which is the most important one. But let's say
Sure.
the most ubiquitous one in our body is water,
Yeah. Yeah.
because 99% of the molecules inside of our body are water. And when water gets exposed to infrared light, it changes from a liquid form into this gel like or jelly like form, which is called structured water. And the structured water then changes its peak absorption from the infrared light into the UV range, because fundamentally, as the nature of matter changes, light bends differently. So when water changes from this liquid form into this jelly like form, via the peak absorption of infrared light. Now that it's in a jelly-like form, its peak absorption is in a completely different spectrum, and now it absorbs UV light better. And when it does that, that increases the amount of electrons inside of it. So we have this key non-visual photoreceptor that's able to dance with both of the frequencies that we can't see that are on either side of the visible spectrum. And so for me, like water is absolutely key. We've got to be drinking the right water. We've got to be making the right water using our mitochondria, and with the water as well. I think it's really important that we are imparting it with the right information, and that right information is the spin of the photons that we're exposing ourselves to.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea that, um, yeah, water. What a phenomenal example. What a phenomenal example. That is key. We've talked about easy water. We've talked about Gerald Pollack's work. We've referenced Veda Austin's work. How intention can even shape your water. There's so many. There's so many aspects to the water debate. I think I would agree with you that it is the most important one. Definitely, definitely. Um, but yeah, it's this beautiful connection to the body. And I remember when I was talking with Kira about it, it was interesting. She mentioned that our bodies create our own light as well, right? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we do. We create our own photons. They're called biophotons, and it is in the infrared spectrum as well as the UV spectrum. And so we are creating our own light. Um, all of this light is being produced predominantly in the mitochondria. And so as a byproduct of metabolism, infrared light and UV light is being made by us. And the UV light that's being made by us is in the UVC range. So within UV light itself, there's like three different bands. There's UVA, which is 280 to 320 nanometers. No, that's UVB. UVA is 320 to 400. UVB is 280 nanometers to 320. And then UVC is, I think, 100 nanometers up to 200 nanometers. And the light that we are producing is in the UVC range. The cool thing is that if you understand a little bit more about what type of light reaches us from the sun, less than 1% of the UVC light that the sun makes actually reaches Earth, because the ozone layer is able to filter it out, because too much UVC is damaging to us. In fact, there's medical applications for UVC light in sterilization of instruments, for instance. But
Sure.
we are producing our own UVC light, and this is a light which is stronger than the terrestrial sunlight, than the sunlight that reaches Earth, that reaches our lands. And so just to think on that we are producing a light which is stronger than the sun's terrestrial light is absolutely phenomenal. And it really points to this whole concept of we are light beings, we are quantum light beings, and we have immense power inside of us through the ability of the light that we make.
Yeah, amazing. The mitochondria is one of the few organelles that Harold Hillman said exists in a cell. And it's something that quantum biology refers to a lot. And I think it's really important. And I think it speaks to the validity of quantum biology because I really enjoy Dr. Harold Hillman's work. We've talked about it again and how the endoplasmic reticulum might be an artifact of the electron microscope. Same with like the Golgi, or even there's questions about the nucleus and things like that. Maybe there is an energetic nucleus rather than a physical one, but he does mention that the mitochondria is a true organelle, and I take his word for it at this point. But yeah, the mitochondria is so powerful. It creates water, it creates light. What is the significance of it beyond what you were already talking about there?
The so it was formerly a bacteria, and so because of that, I think that's why Dr. Harold Hellman is saying that it is the one organelle inside the cell that I guess he believes to be true. because it was previously a bacteria that was taken in or ingested or enveloped. I can't remember the exact correct word for it, where it was taken into another cell and then used for its ability to produce energy. And the energy that it produces, most people think is ATP, but it's actually more to do with the water that the mitochondria produces. And so, like with everything in nature, there's like a beautiful periodicity to it. There's a beautiful cyclical nature to it, and we have photosynthesis happening with plants and trees where they're breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen, and they're sequestering the carbon into the land. But then when we eat plants, trees, animals, etc., we are then having to do a reverse of the nature's photosynthesis, and so the mitochondria is able to do that because we breathe in the oxygen, we are consuming this carbon-based organic matter, and then we are breathing out carbon dioxide, and we are producing water. And that water is then structured by the infrared light, and then even more so structured by the UV light to create this exclusion zone water and this bulk phase water to create that interplay between the positive charge and the negative charge. And that's what actually charges us. That's the energy. It's not so much the ATP. But yeah, mitochondria are like this. They're these environmental sensors more so than just the energy producers, and they're sensing the environment, and they're saying, okay, well, Jalal's in New South Wales, Australia. Is the food that he's eating of New South Wales, Australia, or is it an avocado that's been grown in South America? A lot of the avocados here are grown in South America, or is it a mango that's grown in the north of Australia in Queensland, and it's not a mango from New South Wales? So like it's doing those constant checks and then reporting that information back to the brain. Um, the thalamus is the key part, and the thalamus of the brain is kind of like the tuning fork that tunes us to the Earth's Schumann resonance. And so when the thalamus of the brain is getting aberrant information from the mitochondria, where the mitochondria is saying, he's in New South Wales, Australia, but he's not eating food from there, and it's sending that information to the thalamus, and then the thalamus is supposed to tune in with the Earth's Schumann resonance, but it can't even sense the Earth's Schumann resonance because there's so much 5G around, and Wi-Fi and all that type of stuff. That's when we start to see a breakdown in the physical of our body.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. The endosymbiont theory, I think it is.
Yes,
The
that's it.
we absorb it.
Endosymbiosis. That's it.
Yeah, endosymbiosis. Yeah, and Lynn Margulis. A little note for the listeners: Lynn Margulis proposed that theory, and she was actually against the HIV causing AIDS. She spoke out against that. So, just a little note for you listeners out there. I remember learning about her in university, and definitely didn't learn that little detail about her. But yeah, she was definitely opposed to the HIV cause, which obviously we like here. And she actually wrote a couple papers against Darwinism. So very interesting individual she was. But anyways, I digress here. Um, yeah, the and in university, something that I did learn, like I took biochemistry, right? And so we learned biochemical pathways and the citric acid cycle and all this good stuff, right? Um, H2O as the product of like the in the mitochondria. I'm blanking here of what the cycle we call it. Anyways, the end product being H2O. We brushed that off so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it was so quick that we brushed it off like it was like the byproduct. It was almost unnecessary, right? You mentioned that it's almost more important. Maybe we
Hmm.
can touch on that and maybe talk a little bit about ATP and your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So my understanding, and a lot of this is the work of Gilbert Ling, and it's important for me to credit Dr. Jack Cruz because he's been able to um, grab information from all of these really forward thinkers that were thinking outside the square, such as Dr. Gilbert Ling, and piece these together with his understanding of evolution to really push forward and move forward this whole paradigm of quantum biology. So I did want to acknowledge Dr. Cruz for that. Um, with ATP, my understanding is that it actually unfolds proteins so that the protein hydration sites can be available to bond to water. And so then you need them. So you got the mitochondria producing the mechanism that unfolds the proteins, and then you've got the mitochondria producing the key instrument that binds to the proteins, which is the water, of course. So so yeah, that's really how things work. Proteins
Beautiful.
inside of us, proteins inside of us don't work unless they are hydrated by our body's water. They just don't work. And so there's this problem where we are living lives that are actually affecting our body's ability to produce water. It's affecting the mitochondria. So then your body becomes dehydrated at a cellular level. And that's a dehydration that's got little to do with the water that you're drinking, but everything to do with the water that you're not making. And that dehydration affects tissues, it affects muscles, it affects ligaments. We've got uh, just anecdotal evidence. I've got more and more friends in their late 20s and early 30s who are tearing ligaments doing something simple, like they're not even playing any heavy contact sport, and they're hurting themselves, and it's a long recovery. And this points to the fact that they're living lives that are basically all to do with blue light exposure on the eye and the skin and minimal sun exposure, and so their cells are dehydrating, which just means that they're just easier to break and hard to put back together.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think back to when we did go over Gilbert Ling's work. I believe he was the one that proposed the idea that there is the structured water that surrounds proteins as well, right? Like the association induction hypothesis, I
Yeah.
believe. And um, yeah, I think just to kind of put a little note for the listeners too, we've talked about Gilbert Ling before. I just want to remind you guys that
Well,
um,
he was able
this is
to
such a cool.
he was able to prove that the theory of ATP providing the energy for our cell was breaking the second law of thermodynamics. So it was just thermodynamically impossible for ATP to be the source of energy inside of our cell. And so that's what led him to lead to looking for a different solution. And it came to water, and he was right. He wasn't entirely right about the mechanisms behind how water produced the energy. And I think Dr. Pollack really blew open the lid on that with all of his amazing work.
Yeah.
But it was Dr. Gilbert Ling that really pushed us in the right direction to think a little bit differently. And I mean, the ATP oxidative phosphorylation hypothesis as with ATP being the key energy factor inside of the cell. I mean, that won a Nobel Prize, which has been proven wrong. So it just goes to show that not necessarily our Nobel Prizes are all correct.
Yeah. We like to hear that, I think. Yeah, that's cool. That's a really cool perspective. A really, really great explanation, I think. Yeah, so on the topic of water, there's, we're producing water with our mitochondria. Light is involved in this. The energy, the food that we're consuming, all plays a role in this, right? All plays a role. Um, Consumption of water, you know, like I think obviously it should be structured, right? Right off the
Yeah.
bat. It should be structured. What I guess I'd like to hear your kind of postulates for what a good drinking water is. How do we get that good drinking water nowadays?
Look, I mean, your ideal drinking water is like just naturally occurring spring water, but then you have to look at, okay, well, what is the land area that it's capturing? Is that land being sprayed with glyphosate and other things? But we also live in a society where it's so hard to be healthy. There's fluoridated water and this and that, and so it's like, what can we do that's like the bare minimum which our body can handle? Because if you understand properly all of this quantum stuff, then we appreciate that we structure our own water. So it's not the end of the world if we don't structure the water that we ingest, that we have. Um, so we structure our own water. So I mean, people can be having reverse osmosis water, which is great because it filters out a lot of the issues. But then the problem with the reverse osmosis water is that it filters out all the good minerals that may be in the water, and so you're literally drinking a dead water. And so um, when you're drinking a water which is like entirely dead, but at the same time stripped of all its minerals, when you have that, it's going to draw all the minerals out of your body into the water because water has an affinity for minerals. And so
Yeah.
when I'm drinking water, I'm always adding, something like Celtic sea salt back into it, because just a little bit, and that's enough just to give it a little bit of a mineral profile, to help protect my body. And it's not necessarily a bad taste. It's something which I've quite quickly became accustomed to, and I'm enjoying it. And now I find it hard to drink water without it being remineralized in some way. So that's how I do it. And like it's important as well that we talk about optimal health and stuff, but we shouldn't be holding ourselves to such standards where it's like if we don't meet them, we think that we're going to die, or that it's the end of the world, because then that itself creates a lot of stress and increases cortisol, and that hurts the journey. So like there are like the top tier things which are absolute must that are non-negotiables, and then there are like the stuff which are nice to haves, because our body has this ability to handle a lot of assault. Like it's so robust. We store light inside of our bodies at 7 different levels, 7 different scales. So like it's okay if not everything's perfect. Um, so if the water's not 100% ideal, it's not the end of the world. For me, the non-negotiables is like that morning sun. It's artificial, blocking artificial blue light. I pretty much do it most of the day. Right now, I'm not wearing glasses, but the screen is set to the orange. But at work, I pretty much work with no ceiling lights on. I just use the natural light coming in through the windows. Um, and I guess I'm fortunate because I'm in a position where I'm working for myself, so I can dictate that. But but the lights that we have at work are kind of full spectrum lights from a local company called Block Blue Light, and so the blue light within those lights changes throughout the day to mirror the sun. Um, and and so yeah, it's with water, as I said, it's important, no doubt about it. But what's more important is that we're structuring our water.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. And yeah, the fear is worse than anything that you could consume, right? Like we get back to Veda Austin's work, the intention, right? Our mindset, you know, on drinking. If you're going to sit there and say, "Oh, this water's bad," well, then that water's going to pick up on that energy, right? So,
Yeah,
the very, you know, a nice like little practice of gratitude, a little blessing on the water never hurts, even if it's some tap water, some city tap water, maybe. I mean, I just still try to avoid that stuff, but
yeah. Look, I mean,
um,
tap water, I totally agree, is something which like avoid at all costs. So like
yeah,
traditionally, when I head out with the family, we have literally like 5 or 6 like 1 liter water bottles just always in the car, and they're always waiting in either in the fridge or on the countertop ready to go. Just because if we do end up going to a restaurant, or we end up going to some friend's place, and they don't have the filtered water, we will be pretty strict on not drinking the tap water.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, really, this is largely because of the toxicity associated with it, right? It's not necessarily that it's not structured or that it's the amount of
Exactly.
toxins in it is really the concerning part. Yeah, so good, great distinction there, honestly. Yeah. So one more question, kind of on the topic of quantum biology,
Sure.
biochemical pathways. What weight can we attribute to the study of biochemistry as it is right now? You know, I understand. We could get into Sense Georgi's work. We could get into some true, visionaries in my mind of how to look at biochemistry. But what are your thoughts on the pathways associated with it? What weight do you place on that, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Not much, if I'm honest. Just because I don't think that we're ever going to know the full story of all the biochemical pathways. I think what's more important to appreciate is that there are 100,000 biochemical reactions happening inside of our body every second, and they all need to be timed to perfection. So who really is? I don't really care about the nature of the biochemical reactions. I care about timing them to perfection, which really comes back to circadian biology, and understanding how our body gets its sense of time and preserves it. Um, it's not to say that biochemistry isn't important, but I just feel that there's an element of we're never going to know all the biochemical pathways, and sometimes you just have to surrender to the fact that you're not going to know them all, and that what's more important is timing them, and and I guess there's also this element of this. It's still very reductionist, and it's not really of a vitalist approach to the way the body works, because it's never really about the body. If you look at Albert St. George's work on the TCA cycle, um, for instance, the TCA cycle is more about deuterium and hydrogen than anything else. Because why does it take 9 steps to split a 6-carbon glucose into 2 3-carbon pyruvates? Why does it take 9 steps?
Not very efficient.
Exactly. Yeah, like if we think about it in a typical way, it's very inefficient, isn't it? Like, can't you just get, some protein that acts like a scissor and just cleaves it into 2 in one step, and then you're like done? And the reason is this: the TCA cycle is used to check every single hydrogen on the glucose and to confirm that it's not a deuterium.
Hmm.
That's the
Beautiful.
reason. So, I mean, the biochemists are still looking at everything the wrong way. It fundamentally always comes back to electrons and protons and the nature of the protons. Is it a protium or is it a deuterium?
Wow. Well, I sure appreciate that explanation. I'm sure listeners will too. That's really interesting. Different way to look at it, for sure. Yeah, amazing. I got one more question actually about this
Sure.
topic, and then maybe we can move into some dentistry if we can get off this topic. I've got so many questions I can ask. Um, Artificial UV light or artificial infrared light. These are kind of things that hot topics in the alternative world. You got the red lights. The given the infrared light, you have the UV light during the day. They say it's the happy light or whatever it is. And maybe even we could group tanning beds into this. What are your thoughts on this? Like, is it a viable mimicry of nature? Is it actually helpful? Is the EMFs worse than the non-natives EMFs worse than the actual UV and infrared? What are your thoughts surrounding this topic?
It's a good question. I think for someone on a health journey, sometimes they need the extra light just to really help them, because they may be living in an environment or a latitude which is low in UV light. And yes, the answer is move closer to the equator where there's a better light environment. But some people have kids and they've got to work and they've got older parents and they can't just get up and leave. And so it's it can it's important that we respect that, and we come up as a industry, we come up with ways to help people. So, I mean, I think the power of the red light and that the red light therapy with the associated infrared lights, I think that's quite powerful. I'm a bit wary of the artificial UV lights, just because like it needs to be balanced by the red, and if it's misused, it can really hurt people. Um, Fundamentally, though, like even if you're not living at an optimal latitude, like all of these things are just an excuse to just stop you from going outside. It really
Mm,
is that simple. It's free. It's easy. It's going to improve your mood because you get the full spectrum. These are still narrow bands, and you need the full spectrum. And we must appreciate and understand that the sun is not just one spectrum of light. It's a full spectrum of light, and so you get everything that your body needs at all the scales in order for it to have that flow state. So in short, I recommend it sometimes. It's a case by case basis, but it's not something which I would have a blanket rule for everybody that they need to do.
Awesome. Well put. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, I do want to talk a little bit about dentistry. I want to
Sure.
hear, maybe we could just have a brief overview, your approach to dentistry, what effect the teeth and the mouth and the airways has on the body, maybe just a little intro spiel, and we'll get into that a little more.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, dentistry is an interesting area of health because most dental schools, at least mine, were just taught about teeth and we're taught about how to repair teeth and we're taught a little bit about the cosmetic side of things, veneers and orthodontics, etc. But we're not really taught about anything else. And so, I've been a dentist for 12 years, but for the first 3, 4 years, I was really just in my lane, doing what I was taught, etc. And then I started to realize or ask the question, why are teeth crowded in the first place? And so that led me to think about different reasons for that and started to come across Weston A. Price's work. I read Dr. Stephen Lin's book on which is called The Dental Diet. He's a colleague that's not too far from where I am, probably a couple of hours, so a local colleague. And that was a fabulous book, which was really expanding on Price's work and explaining some of the dietary considerations around why dental health should be improved, how dental health can be improved, things like vitamin D, vitamin K2, organ meats, etc., etc. But I still feel though that like there's many dentists that are holistic inclined, and this is going to be controversial, but they're still doing a half job of things because they're focusing on no fluoride, they're focusing on BPA free materials, they're focusing on like no root canals and ceramic implants, and and all this type of stuff. Um, and they're well intentioned and they're well meaning and they're doing great work, but they've still stopped at just like the teeth and the teeth materials. Then you've got a few of them that are thinking as airway dentists or functional dentists, and they're appreciating that if the teeth are crowded, it's because the jaw is too small. So let's just make the jaw bigger. And because the airway sits behind the jaw, then we make the jaw bigger. Then that's going to help the airway. It's going to help the child to breathe better, and so they're going to sleep better and happy days. So these airway dentists and these functional dentists, or integrative dentists, I was one of them for a few years, and I actually stopped doing the work in the middle because I was like, something's not right here. It just doesn't add up. So for about 2, 3 years, I stopped doing the work, and I just went back to general dentistry until like I found the answer to what was missing, which was the fact that even the functional dentists are doing a half job because they're just focusing on this part here and they've forgotten about the whole cranium. And so that requires it requires a humility. It requires a dropping of the ego to understand that I am an osteopath. I'm just working on different bones. And so I'm working on the upper jaw and I'm working on the lower jaw and I'm working on the teeth. And I would go as far as to say that every tooth is its own individual bone because the ligament that it's held in the bone, like every tooth has a bit of give. That ligament is called it has something called Sharpie's fibers in it. There was this really smart guy called Sharpie who discovered some fibers and named them after himself. Um, but those Sharpie's fibers are also found inside the sutures between the cranial bones. And so what we have is, I believe, is like we've got 32 bones inside of our mouth, and those are the teeth. And so I'm just an osteopath that's working on this section here. And so when I met Cole, who you've interviewed, who is a cranial osteopath, and when he explained to me, his way of thinking about the mouth, it was kind of like a light bulb moment for me. It was like, holy moly, this is actually the holy grail of dentistry. And it's got nothing to do with teeth and jaws, and it's got everything to do with the cranium. But I haven't been taught any of that. And so it's like, okay, I have to go and start to read some books. I have to sit down and talk with Cole more, and I have to pick his brain. I have to understand how, the sphenoid bone and the occipital bone work and how that drives the mechanism, this primary respiratory mechanism, which all the osteopaths talk about. And I mean, Cole says now that I explain the primary respiratory mechanism better than he does. So but he probably explains the dentistry better than I do. But
Yeah.
that's how much time we've spent together talking and inquiring about each other's disciplines, so that we can both become better clinicians and practitioners for our patients. And it's been beautiful, because working alongside Cole has been, for me, the purest expression of myself as a physician. And I think it's quite humbling to appreciate that that is not happening with just me alone as an individual, but it's happening with someone else. So it's like I can't express myself entirely as a clinician the best way I can unless Cole is around. Um, so that's been humbling. It's been beautiful. But yeah, I mean, we have, as dentists, what my take is that, like, we are quantum thermodynamic beings, to go back to the first half of this conversation. And quantum thermodynamic beings are essentially nonlinear light beings. And so any environmental stimulus that we receive is amplified, like, massively inside of our body. And it might not necessarily be amplified locally. It could be amplified to, like, a distant part of the body. So when one photon comes in through the eye, it gets amplified a millionfold. So when there's a stimulus that comes in through the mouth, or when the teeth bite together incorrectly, that stimulus can be amplified throughout the body as well. And how does that happen? So the teeth are all sitting on meridians, and so when they come together, they're actually providing a charge for all of the organs and tissues on those meridians. And so we need to have the teeth coming together nicely. We need all teeth touching. We need a balanced bite. But in addition to that, we have this concept of, like, vectors. And so what vectors are is uh, basically like, it's like a force vector. It's like a direction of travel of force. And so, for instance, like, let's say if I was to get a knock to the head from here, and it was coming in like this. For those that are listening, it's my right cheek. It will come out through the left side of my head, around, my left eye type, or left temple. And so, we've all had knocks and bumps growing up, jumping on the monkey bars, and, maybe it's a sports injury. But when I get knocked from the right, the compression of the bone is not actually on the right. The compression of the bone is actually on the left side of the head, where the force vector exits. And now you start to look at the structure of teeth, and teeth have got, like, the crowns, which are the parts that we can see when we smile, and they're like above the gum. Or then you've got below the gum, you've got roots, but all the roots are, like, in, twisting and turning in different directions. And yes, they house the nerve canals, but what they're also doing is they're delivering the force vector to different parts of the head, different parts of the cranium. So we can use the mouth to amplify the movement of the cranial bones by getting patients to bite on their teeth correctly. So that's what Cole and I do. We deliver, like, I am able to make appliances which deliver forces to the rest of the head via the mouth, these force vectors. And then we get this better movement of the cranial bones. And just to come back to, like, what that mechanism is that I touched on earlier, like, our cranial bones they're moving, they're flexing and extending against each other, while we are conscious. Well, in you and I, even you and I, in 30, 40, 50 years, like, that cranial bone movement will still be there, and it's happening all the time. It's a rhythmic motion, and it's ever so gentle, it's ever so slight, but it's there. And the cranial osteopaths are trained well enough to be able to sense and palpate that, and then understand if there's a locking of it, where, like, one bone isn't moving as well as what it could be. And when you get a locking of the cranial bones, that's when you get trouble, because the movement of the cranial bones is driving the rhythmic motion of the cerebrospinal fluid down the spinal column and back up into the brain, down the spinal column, back up into the brain. So it's like a hydraulic pumping of the cerebrospinal fluid. It's also helping to clear the lymph that builds up in the head. And so and we get a locking of the cranial bones, means we can't pump the cerebrospinal fluid as well as possible. We can't clear the lymph as well as we can. That starts to lead to brain fog. And then the mystics among us will believe that the soul, the cerebrospinal fluid, is the seat of the soul. And so if the seat of the soul is not pumping optimally, does that injure the soul? How do we heal the soul? Well, let's at least get it to express itself properly. And so that's what Cole and I do together in our patients. So we kind of think of it as like a dental alchemy, because, or a craniodental alchemy, because we're not just helping people on a physical body level with their headaches and their migraines and their neck pain and their left hip pain, but we're helping them at the soul level as well, because we truly believe that the cerebrospinal fluid is the seat of the soul. And we've had some like tremendous transformations in some patients who don't block artificial blue light. They don't get any sun. Their skin is as pale as anything, like as pale as so that they look unhealthy. And they're not eating optimal foods, and they're drinking tap water, and they've made no lifestyle changes whatsoever. And I'm not saying that, it's okay to do all those things, guys. But what I'm saying is that all we've done is optimize the pumping of the cerebrospinal fluid via delivering forces through the mouth and the cranial osteopathic work. And this girl comes back to us 2 months later, and she just feels absolutely incredible. And she looked amazing. Like, she looked like you could sense the light that was coming off her. There was so much vitality in her eyes. Cole and I were just like completely dumbfounded at the transformation in her. And she felt it herself. And as I said, she's made no lifestyle changes. So I guess what I'm trying to discuss, or elaborate on, is this concept of like the metaphysical really is the key driver behind things. Because if you unlock the soul and you heal the soul will take care of the rest. If you free the soul of all the injuries that it's accumulated throughout life, whether that be societal, programming, or, culture, or parents, or, some sort of trauma along the way, physical, sexual, emotional, you free the soul of those traumas, then the soul will start to make the right decisions. Now she's starting to stop drinking the tap water. She's like, okay, what can I do next? What can I do next, Jalal? Where do I buy the blue light blockers from? Now she's asking me these questions. And it's just a sign that the soul is healing. And now she's ready to make those lifestyle changes. Whereas if you just go hard and say, nah, you need to do these things first, it's not a sensitive way as a clinician to try and heal people. So, I mean, yeah, my day job is dentistry, but like all of my new patients, I step out of the role as dentist and I go into this other role, which a term which I coined, which is the primary care metaphysician. And I stand back as a primary care provider for this person, but not a primary care provider as a general practitioner in, the physical body, traditional Western medicine space, but in a metaphysical space. And I'm like, okay, where is this person stuck? Are they stuck at the soul? Are they stuck in the mind? Are they stuck in the physical body? Where do they need help? Where do they need to shove in the right direction? And then I work out from there. And more often than not, we can use the mouth to help that through the optimizing of the cerebrospinal fluid flows, the CSF flows. But other times it's like they're not even ready for that. They've got to do other things first. They've got to go and read a holy book, or go and see a shaman, or something like that first. Change their diet, go carnivore for 6 weeks. Not that I'm like a fan of long-term carnivore, but there's nothing wrong with carnivore for a short period of time just to rescue a situation.
Agreed. Yeah, what a beautiful overview. And it was a light bulb for me talking with your partner Cole, and again today. And it seems like every week when I have a new guest on. But, so maybe the listeners are going to be annoyed by me saying that, but it's true. It's amazing to hear these connections. Right, everything's so beautifully connected, and what I want to highlight is like the teeth referring to different parts of the skull. Right, like the biggest takeaway from our podcast with Cole was if you're ever going to do any sort of work on the front and the maxilla and the mandible, you need to be addressing the whole skull. That
Yeah,
was the key takeaway. What I really like about what you were saying there was how the teeth refer to all places in the skull. And Cole mentioned this, that the bite, um, that you guys would, that you specially design something to bite down on so that all the teeth can refer properly to the rest of the skull. And so
It's body
You
type
know,
specific though.
body type
That
specific.
it like
Yeah.
we don't go to the level of, okay, Liev is not sleeping well, and he's got a bit of brain fog, and he's struggling to function optimally, and he doesn't feel like the same Liev of 5 years ago. We're going to just make this appliance, and then if Liev B comes in with the same, with the same things, we're just going to make the same appliance for him. It's like, well, we use kinesiology to work out what their body type is, and then we design the appliance specifically for the different person's body type. And the determination of that body type, this is where it really loops it nicely. We do this for the adults, not the children, but the determination of the body type really boils down to light in the eyes. So we introduce syntonics. And that's where the mind-blowing stuff is, because like in our eyes we've got we've got cones and we've got rods, and the rods pick up black and white and shadows, etc., and depth, and the cones pick up color. And the three colored cones that we have in our eyes are red, blue, and green. So this is visual photoreception. We've spoken a lot about non-visual photoreception earlier. But so we've got red cones, blue cones, and green cones, and these cones have got varying densities based on body type. So some people have more green cones in their eyes. Some people have more red cones. Some people have more blue cones. Then we've got a primary density of cones, but then we also have a secondary density of cones. So if someone is a green cone primary density, then what's their second most dense cone? Is it blue or is it red? And then once we know what their second is, we know what their third is. So people can be a green, blue, red, or they can be a green, red, blue. They can be a red, green, blue, or a red, blue, green, and the same for the primary blue. So you've got 6 different body types, and each of those body types has a specific personality archetype. And so, like, the red greens have a specific nature, and you start to talk to them about what their nature is without even knowing them, and they're like, "How do you know this? Like, this is uncanny." And it's like, because I know what your body type is, and so do the green blues, and so do the blue reds, etc., etc. And so once we work out what their body type is, then we can make the right appliance for them, and that right appliance is specific to their body type to help them, to help the cerebrospinal flow like it needs to for a red, or like it needs to for a blue.
Hmm. Hmm. So I guess like is the goal, I suppose, I guess the question I want to ask is to get to that ideal bite, right? Kind of to where it's almost not necessary. Like, um, is that possible? Do you think? Is there the perfect bite that refers the teeth to the rest of the skull perfectly? Is that something that you try to foster in children? I know you mentioned that this is something you do with adults, but can you catch it in children and like have their teeth aligned properly?
You can. So in the adults, we call it craniofacial rehabilitation. But in the kids, I like to think of it as the guidance of craniofacial growth. We're just guiding. We're not rehabilitating. Nobody's broken. Everybody's perfect. They just need the keys to be turned in the direction for them to be able to flow forward. Nobody's broken. So with the kids, like, we use appliances that just unlock the body's growth mechanism, which is the movement of the cranial bones that drives the growth of the face forward.
Hmm.
So we're not trying to be like, let's get braces on and like, let's pull this tooth this way and that tooth. Yeah, that looks like the best bite. Perfect. All right, we'll put some retainers in. See you later. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. It's like in the kids, we just, particularly like ages, 4 through to 12. If you just unlock the body's growth mechanism, just let the body do it. The body will design the right bite. The body will design the right teeth, the arch shape, and all that type of stuff. It's harder when you're treating children that are more than 13, because then it really, the onus is on me to really understand what is the right bite for this person, because I have to use some stronger appliances to help guide them in the right direction. But at the end of the day, I'm still kind of respecting the fact that there's a specific body type for this person. So I need to design a mouth that is sensitive to that person's body type. Because if someone is 6'3" and he's a big fellow with broad shoulders. That was in Australia, rugby front rowers or whatever the case is. We They're going to have a completely different mouth to a young petite girl that's going to be 5'3" and is going to be thin and doesn't have a huge amount of weight on her. She doesn't need the same size mouth as him. So it's about understanding that and designing mouths that are specific to body types. The like I had a patient in yesterday who had, like most people, 99% of dentists will look at the mouth and go, it's a perfect mouth. The jaw's big enough. He's ticking all the boxes according to the functional dentistry algorithm. Um, and I looked in his mouth and I said, your mouth's too small for you. And he said, that's exactly how I feel, but no one listens to me. And I said, the reason I can tell is because this tooth is biting in this arrangement, etc., etc. We took a few photos. One of his eyes was higher than the other. One of his ears was, imbalanced compared to the other. So he had all the hallmarks of some sort of craniofacial blockages, which Cole will be able to even out with the aid of an appliance by me. But I guess one of the key things I wanted to share with your listeners was this whole concept of like orthodontics and straightening teeth, and the paradigm that I'm trying to push out there. And I'm grateful for you sharing a platform with me, is because this is some really important information for anyone with children, or even if you've got grandchildren. Tell your children about this for the sake of the grandchildren. Is that the body has an innate intelligence, and when we have crowded teeth, the body's done that for a reason. It's a compensation which is absolutely necessary for you to function properly, for you to breathe properly, for you to walk properly, for you to have your head on your spine. The body has twisted that tooth and moved that tooth further forward, etc., etc. So what I like to think of it is it's a functional misalignment. It's a misalignment, doesn't look great, you want to straighten it, but it's functional. What we in dentistry or orthodontics, patients themselves request this. I want the teeth straightened. So we straighten the teeth, but we have now taken them from a position where they were misaligned but functional, and now we've made them aligned but dysfunctional. And so the body's like, no, 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 no. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? I need to move them back there. And so then the orthodontic relapse starts to happen, where the teeth start to move back. The cranium's driving that. And so then people are like, oh, I'll do it again. I'll have another round of Invisalign, or I have another round of braces to get it back to where it was. And then the number of people that I have that have had 2 or 3 rounds of braces, and they're still seeking the same thing. The definition of an insanity, according to Albert Einstein, was doing the same thing but expecting a different result. So we now have this dysfunctional alignment, which the cranium wants to move back. And so then we as a profession got really smart. We're like, okay, we're going to put retainers in, which is going to hold these things in place. We're going to put a little wire behind the teeth, and that's going to hold the teeth in place. And now the cranium's like, oh, damn, I can't move those teeth back anymore. You're not going to let me recreate that compensation. You bastard. Why'd you do that to me? Like, okay, I'm going to have to get another structure now. I'm really sorry, but another structure is going to have to compensate. And so that's when someone starts to have a click in their left jaw, or they start to get some sort of, mobility in their cervical spine, or the C1 never stays in alignment, or their left hip is out, or, they get right foot pain or right lower back pain because the body's choosing another structure to compensate for the fact that it can't move the teeth back because we locked them in with the wire retainer. And so that is the big paradigm that I want to push on people. I implore them to understand that when you straighten teeth, you need to straighten the body at the same time, which means you need to work with manual therapists that know how to work on their head, that know how to straighten out the rest of the body, so that you create a system around the mouth that holds the mouth in place. Otherwise, the mouth's just going to go back. When I say it, everybody's like, well, duh, obviously. Um, so then it's like, okay, well, now let's push that as a people. Let's demand that of the dental profession. Let's expect that, because that's the only way the dental profession is going to move.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm really glad you brought that up because I think, well, it not only makes a lot of sense, but the body, I think importantly, the body is not stupid. It doesn't just have crooked teeth for no reason. There's always a reason for everything. Nothing happens just randomly, right?
Yeah,
Um, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because aligning the whole body, it's almost like the teeth are a microcosm of the rest of the body, right? If you align the rest of the body, the teeth will also help align, and maybe there is the necessity for aid in that process too. I'm not sure, right? But yeah, you're the expert here. There is there might be a necessity, right? There might be a necessity for help in realignment, like you guys working with the bites and but getting that feedback in the rest of the skull and with the rest of the body, right? Even when I was talking with Cole, yeah, it's good if you're going to do a lot of work on the front, you definitely need to address the back, but we still need to address the whole body too.
100%.
Um, yeah, so I think that's really fundamental. Yeah, I mean, I think this might be a good time to kind of wrap things up. I want to give you the floor, maybe hit anything that you think you missed or anything that you want to add to that. No rush, like whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, look, I mean, my my prevailing message is always that health is not just about the food that you eat. It's not just about the light that you expose yourselves to. It is about the soul. It is about community. It is about laughter. You know, there are plenty of people that are thriving in major cities, but they've got amazing community around them, and that allows them to thrive. So, like, don't be scared of non-native electromagnetic frequencies. Your body has an immense ability to withstand these things, and there's hacks that you can do, but it doesn't mean that you have to drop everything and leave your mum and dad, um, and move away, like, because if you're making life decisions based on fear, then, as Vader Austin's work shows, what does that do to the water inside of your body? So walk around like a lion, walk around like a lioness, own the jungle. It's yours. We are all lions. We are all lionesses. It's a jungle out there. And if we walk around the way that we are designed to, we're going to thrive, and we're going to share our light with other people, and help them shine, help them thrive just by being an example. So, I always like to kind of finish on that note where it's not just about the food. It's not just about the light. It is about the soul. It is about the community. It is about love. It is about laughter, because that trumps all.
Yep, couldn't agree more. Yeah, fear is a killer. Fear and scarcity and all that. All these negative emotions are much worse than anything you can imagine. I love that message. I love it. Amazing. Thank you
Let,
for sharing that. And thank you for coming on today. I want you to tell the listeners how they can find you, how they can support you, how they can learn from you, maybe some websites or social medias.
yeah, sure. My Instagram handle is K2Calibre. So it's K2Calibre. That's also my Twitter or X handle. My website is k2calibre.com. My dental website is thedentalstation.com.au. If you're happy to look at those, I'd be grateful for that. But I guess the other thing is that I am planning to come to Florida in September, and I want to present a talk to really go into detail around some of these quantum dentistry, dental alchemy concepts that I talk about on the podcast. It's probably going to be late September. It's going to be a live event, probably an intimate event, 20 or 30 people with some lectures, but also some live demonstrations that people actually get to see it work, um, in person, face to face. So, um, hit me up in the DMs or via email if you're interested in that. I'd be very grateful, and really appreciate you having me on the show, Leah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm gonna put the links down below, so should be easy access. That's cool. That'd be a great talk to go to, I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah, definitely something you want to see in person too with the examples. That like live examples, that'd be amazing. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thanks again. That I really appreciate this talk. You got like you and I liken it to Cole as well. You two have amazing perspectives. I think you guys are on the forefront. I think you guys are hitting the nail on the head when it comes to dentistry, when it comes to um, restructuring and remediation of the jaw, and because it's a hot topic right now, the mewing and the thumb pulling and the maxilla expansion. And I think it's a great movement. I think it is. I really think it is. I'm glad that people are focusing on it. But you and Cole definitely bring a longevity perspective to it, right? You guys are taking the true holistic perspective towards it. So
Yeah,
that's why I really deeply appreciate your guys' work, and I really want to get it out there more. My humble following here, I know they appreciate it as well. Definitely.
big love.
Yeah. All right. I want to thank you guys all for listening. You should know this is not medical advice. This is not dental advice either. This is for informational purposes only. But remember, we're all responsible, sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely anything. Every single one of us. We, the people, and the greater forces together are self healers, self governable, self teachers, and so much more. Please reach out if you have any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, whatever it may be. You know where to find me on Instagram. It's where I answer all the messages. And yeah, guys, I really appreciate you guys for taking the time today. If you enjoyed it, found it informative, give us a like, comment, help me grow. Whatever thing you're on, do the thing to help me. I appreciate you guys. Remember, there are two types of people in the world: those who believe they can, those who believe they can't, and they are definitely both correct. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Take care.